feels like a performance. We're waiting, but we're on
By day 3. Okay, we're ready. Hello, everybody. No. Caught the technical team off guard. There we go. Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. If we could just take our seats. We are ready to begin. Welcome. I'm Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the launch of the Con Home conference programme this year here in the Con Home marquee, kindly sponsored by OVO Energy. And suitably, we're kicking off by tackling, in my personal opinion, one of the most, if not the most important policy issues facing the country. How do we, in the words of the young Liberals, build more bloody houses? This event is in partnership with NHBC, and we will be addressing the issue of what are the barriers to the UK building the houses we need, and how can we break those barriers down, both from the government side and from the side of industry. Joining me today is Lewis Sidnick, Director of Corporate Affairs at NHBC, Jenny Daly, Chief Executive of Taylor Wimpey, Brian Berry, the Chief Executive of the Federation of Master Builders, and Rachel McLean MP, the Minister for Housing and Planning. The format will be familiar to any of you who are sort of regular attendees of our conference programme. Each speaker will speak for a few minutes and give some opening remarks. I may then hijack proceedings to ask a couple of questions myself, and then we will throw things open to the floor. So without further ado, kicking us off, Lewis.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Henry. We're really pleased to be here today. I think this is our 10th NHBC Con Home Party Conference Fringe in a row, so really pleased to be working with you again, and thank you for hosting us today, and particularly thank you to the Minister for joining us. Really pleased you could be here. So for those of you who don't know NHBC, we're an insurance company in the housing sector, and about 1.6 million newly built homes are insured by NHBC's 10-year Build Mark warranty. But we're more than an insurance company. We also set standards, and about 70% of the industry homes are built across the industry are built according to NHBC's technical standards. So I think I've just got a few minutes, so I'll make 3 very quick points. I think the first point in unlocking the potential of the housing sector that I want to make is that the housing sector is in a lot of trouble right now, and I'm not sure if it's been recognised as much as it needs to be. We register, as I said, about 70% of all new homes that are built, and our latest data for the last quarter has shown there's a 42% decline. 42% decline in the number of new homes that were built in the last quarter compared to the same quarter a year ago. And the market, it had been quite resilient until more recently, that it went up 22% last year. So this is quite a new and worrying change. And I think that if we recognise the extent of that challenge of 42% fall, we should ask ourselves, secondly, what can we do about it? Because I think we all agree that we need to build more homes. So what can we do about it? I think the first thing, and it's good to have the Minister next to me, is to look forward to the autumn statement in November next month and see what the Chancellor and the Treasury can do to support demand, to support more young people getting onto the housing ladder, to support more first-time buyers. There were a lot of government support policies over the years that supported people to get on the housing ladder, and some of those have been withdrawn recently. So it'd be very good to look towards the autumn statement and see what the Treasury can do and what Rachel can do, working with her Treasury colleagues, to support the sector. I think more longer term or medium term is skills and training and apprenticeships is a very big issue to unlock the potential of the market. We have seen in recent years the number of older people, older than 50, in the sector has crept up. It was about 20% of the sector, it's now about 25% of the sector. And we need more young people in this sector. And the NHBC Foundation, our research body, has looked into this. And we went into schools, our foundation, and like you would expect, young people, do you want to work in the construction sector? It's a bit not quite sure, it's not great enthusiasm. But when you educate them, particularly educate girls in schools about the opportunities in the sector, there's so much more enthusiasm. So I think we need to do much more on educating younger people about the benefits of working in the sector. And the third point, perhaps we need to look at being more innovative. Many countries around the world, in Europe, rely much more on MMC, modern methods of construction, innovative construction, to produce quality homes more efficiently. And it's something perhaps we can look to do more in the UK. And NHBC has been supporting a lot in that area with different products. I think my last point on unlocking the sector is quite an obvious point, but it's often an overlooked point. I think too much of the commentary about the sector is negative from the industry, often from government, from politicians. It's talking negatively about new build homes. I think if we want more of this product, we should collectively talk more positively about homes. New build homes have many benefits to them, that they're energy efficient, they're greener, they're cheaper to run than older homes. They come with a 10-year warranty. An older home will not have a 10-year insurance warranty protection. And the customer satisfaction level on new build homes is really high. You know, people are really happy with their home. If you look at the surveys, most people would recommend their builder to a friend. So there's a lot of pluses to talk about new build housing. I think we should stop talking negatively when something goes wrong, unfortunately, and focus on the bigger picture and how much good this industry is doing and what a good product it's producing. So that's it for me in the 3 minutes, I think. So the first point is recognise the challenge, 42% decline. Second point is recognise the opportunity to do something, the autumn statement, skills, innovation, MMC. And thirdly, talk up the industry, recognise the benefits and the positives that the industry is delivering, and get behind the industry. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lewis. The university debater in me loves the 3 points, tight discipline. You learn by heart. Right, over to Jenny.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to join you all today. Lewis has already touched on sort of the demand side and the impact that particularly the current economic headwinds are having within the sector, and particularly I would reinforce the comments around first-time buyers. We have seen a very significant decline in the ability of first-time buyers to affect their housing need through the housing market. But just to sort of set in overview the effect that the market change is having, in 2019, Taylor Wimpey, which is one of the larger home builders right across the UK, delivered just over 15,000 homes. So that was in 2019. And this year, although we're not at the end of the year yet, we're guiding the markets to the delivery of somewhere between 10,000 and 10,500 homes. So that's a very significant drop. And there are a number of reasons that also sit strategically or structurally below some of the levels of home building that we're seeing now, or that we may expect to see, even in an environment where sort of affordability improves through wage growth and improving economic conditions. And that, of course, takes me very significantly to planning. So there are two areas that I would say are fundamental to unlocking our future housing potential. The first is planning, and the second is, as Lewis has already mentioned, skills. So I'll concentrate predominantly on planning, and then just a little word on skills to close. So, I would say that we should acknowledge that, it's a fundamental truth that our planning system is the bedrock upon which housing delivery and future housing potential is based. It's been under pressure for a number of decades. This isn't an issue that has just occurred. And there are two main sort of reasons, or two main issues that I think that we need to look at. The first is a significant under-resourcing of planning as a profession, as a service within local authorities. And I'm not necessarily calling out that is all sort of local authorities' issues. We've seen a 60% drop in funding to local planning authorities since 2009, 2010. So as planning on a regulatory and legislative basis has become more complex, with environmental issues and a range of other complexities being added, and of course we've seen the growth of the economy and housing over the last decade or more, so more and more pressure for local planning offices to deliver. The funding has simply not been there, and we've seen really very significant losses of planning resource and planning expertise across our local authorities in the country. And the second element is that our planning policy environment has become a combination of an action and an action, short-term fixes, course corrections, leaving really a vacuum for something that requires significant long-term planning to stay the course in order to deliver and unlock housing potential. We plan in more than 3-year stages, and we need planning consistency in order to deliver our businesses and deliver increases in housing. It can't be done year to year. It requires consistency of policy. So that absence of a housing strategy such that we're really looking at a planning system that has become an end in itself rather than supporting positive economic and social outcomes, I think is a significant issue for us. So, my plea would be that we need a recalibration of our planning system, of how we think about development, not just housing, but, yes, very much housing within our planning system. And we look to deliver those long-term requirements through a stable and strategically thought through planning system with housing at its heart. I did say that I would touch on skills just very briefly, Henry, as I sort of bring it to a close. That stability is also required for good long-term skills training, how we plan our businesses and how we bring people in to our sort of skill sets on site. And so not just planning, offering the overall housing numbers, but the stability for us to actually put into action some of the investment that Lewis has referred to, training and apprenticeships, but also innovation and really striving out to drive not just our housing delivery, but the way in sustainability that we deliver our housing in the future. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you very much, Henry. And thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak this afternoon. And great that actually at the start of the party conference we're actually talking about housing, because I think it is one of the big issues that we should be talking about. It should, in my opinion, be one of the top 5. So for those of you probably not so familiar about the Federation of Master Builders, we are a trade body for small and micro building companies all across the UK. So my members are primarily involved in the repair, maintenance and improvement of domestic buildings, but about half of those dip in and dip out of the housing market. And that's really important in terms of trying to create new housing companies coming into the housing supply. But unfortunately, over the recent decades, only 10% and probably less of all new homes are built by local house builders. The market is dominated by the larger contractors, and that's something that needs addressing because we effectively have a rather broken housing market. So I just want to stress the fact that actually housing numbers are going down. It concerns all of us, particularly in the industry, because at a time when we need more and more homes, we're building fewer and fewer. And this year, I did hear a rumour that we would be building fewer than 100,000 new homes, which obviously is absolutely terrible result. And part of that, I would argue, is in terms of housing ministers. Rachel, I want to hold on to you.
Thank you.
Because the trouble is all your predecessors stay for about a year, if that, and disappear. We've had 23 housing ministers since 1997. So please can you stay on and let's see housing there at the top table, because people need a decent home. 1.2 million households on social waiting lists. Average age is the first time buyer 34. You won't get economic growth, you won't get increased productivity unless you've got a supply of housing to enable people to be able to move around the country. And what better way of stimulating regional economic growth than if you have local house builders all across the country? And that's critical because local house builders train the apprentices. It's not the larger contractors, it is the small ones. 95% of the building industry made up of SMEs. And it is the local house builder who will be training and developing the next generation of house builders. And that's why it's so critical that we get more local house builders into the housing supply. Earlier we were talking about some of the problems, the blockages. Look, we've got two main problems, I think, with housing, probably three if you include skills. The first one is, of course, the population is increasing. And at the moment, it's about 67 million, but it's projected to go up to over 80 million by the 2040s. So it's unsustainable if we're not building more homes to meet the needs of the population. And also, of course, we've got a planning system that restricts the supply of land, as it has done since 1947. And there are problems with the planning system which I think, and has been flagged, need to be addressed. First, I think, has been mentioned, the under-resourcing of planning departments is absolutely not helping, and it's making it more difficult for SMEs because their cash flow is a major problem for them if they're going to put in applications. So we need to make sure planning departments are resourced to the right level. And if that means developers having to pay, provided actually they see performance, I think that's perfectly fine. Local plans need to be developed and produced. Only half or so are done. That is a serious failing in our planning system. And, of course, the Green Belt. I think it's probably time to look at a review of what we mean by the Green Belt, because actually it isn't in terms of what most people think of being lush land. Some of it would actually be better served providing more homes. And then the last bit I'll just touch on really is in terms of political ambition. There is, within the Conservative Party, opposition to development. There is opposition in local communities to any form of housing. We need to actually have that political will and ambition to provide the homes because, as I mentioned at the beginning, economic growth won't succeed unless you give people a home to live in, and that can come in any form of tenure. And lastly, my plea is let's open up the housing market. Let's get local house builders involved in supplying the houses that local communities want to a higher design and give people choice. That's my last call. Choice for people to have the homes they want in their communities.
Thank you very much. Lots to get your teeth into, Rachel, as
Yes.
our speaker.
Well, I think this is the problem with going last, isn't it, Henry? But thank you very much for inviting me here. It's lovely to see everybody. I'm going to check if everybody's still awake. I'm going to start with a quiz. I'm going to give you 3 numbers. And I'm going to see if people can connect with these numbers. The first number is 15. Anybody know what does the number 15 represent? This is a housing audience. Come on, someone must know. Henry?
15.
The number 15.
No.
15 housing ministers since 2010.
Yes.
You were close. Okay. I thought I'd get that out of the way because it's usually the white elephant that someone will mention, so I just front it up and get it out of the way that way. But I would like to say, and thank you for your kind words, Brian, I'm actually the longest serving since Kit Malthouse, so I hope I can keep going and improve on that record. The next number is 1 million. Anyone recognise that number? Someone there said Rishi's promise. Yes. That's the number of homes that we're going to build in this Parliament, and we are on track to deliver that. So I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. The third number is 300,000. Yes, that's our target that we need to meet per year. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the things that we're doing and how we hope to meet some of these challenges. As I think you rightly said, Brian, the Conservative Party is the party of home ownership, and so it remains a central task for me, the Secretary of State and the Prime Minister to really put in place some pretty radical actions to deal with some of the headwinds that we're facing that I think Lewis and the other people have mentioned. And I think it's quite emblematic that when I got the call from the Chief Whip, asked me to serve in this position, of course I was delighted to do it. My colleagues said to me, the first thing they said was, well done, congratulations. The next thing they said was, poor you. Because I think everybody recognises some of the difficulties, some of the issues with planning, some of the issues with just the economic situation we're facing, and many of the other things that we are battling with. But I'll just give you a bit of a highlight of what we're doing. And the brief asked me to talk about what's going to come in the King's Speech and what's going to come in the Autumn Statement. And obviously I have no idea, by the way. I have absolutely no idea. Let me put it this way. What I would like to see in the King's Speech and the Autumn Statement is the following things. Before we get to the King's Speech, by the way, we will have royal assent for the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. And that is very important because that's going to give certainty to some of the reforms that we're making, both for local areas, people have already spoken to me about that in this room, and secondly, for reforms of the planning system, which have been a long time in the making, but they are designed to make planning much more modern, fit for the digital age, and a lot simpler for people to navigate through. Obviously, a lot to talk about in that area and a lot to work through. Now, when we get to the King's Speech, one of the things that we really definitely do want to see is leasehold reform. So that is basically getting rid of this awful feudal form of home ownership, as Michael Gove has referred to it, and making sure that when people actually buy a home, whether it's a flat or a house, they actually are an owner of that property and they're not subjected to all these outrageous and shocking and completely non-transparent service charges and ground rent and some other things that they tell me that they've faced. So I think that's wrong, and hopefully we will be able to address that at that legislative opportunity. The next thing is the autumn statement, which we then come to, and I would very much like to see, and I do hope and I believe we will see, some measures to boost the supply side. So some more measures to help young people get a foothold on the housing ladder. They are essential, in my view. We do need to obviously have those discussions with the Chancellor and the Prime Minister, because of course all of this is going to in some way involve a pressure on the public finances, and no doubt we'll all hear in every single panel that we go to how constrained that is and how that balancing act of taxes and spending has to be squared off by people at a much higher pay grade than me. But there are some other things that we can do that don't involve lots and lots of public money, and some of the things are things that I'm very passionate about, and they do sit very much in the space that you've talked about, Brian. I was a small business owner for 30 years before I came into politics. I started and ran my own business. I know what it's like to start a business, pay wages. I know what it's like for that business to go bust. That happened to me. I had to sell my house to start my business all over again. And now, so I feel absolutely distressed when I hear stories about that happening to small builders all over the country. There are some things that we can do on that supply side. Number one, we can fix the nutrient problem, and that's impacted small builders more than anybody else. Obviously, we tried to do that. We introduced legislation into the House of Lords. Unfortunately, the Labour Party whipped their people to vote it down, which I think was shameful and embarrassing for them because they had no alternative. We are going to fix that issue because we know it impacts on those small builders. There's a lot of other things we can do about measures that affect small sites, making planning permission easier to get for small builders, and also for boosting self and custom build. I don't know if Richard Bacon's in the audience, but if he is, he will know that he's been an absolute advocate for some of this, and we very much hope to boost some of that in the autumn statement. Now, you know, obviously we've had a difficult time and our record has faced some challenges, but I just want to leave you with a few thoughts about what we actually have done despite all of the difficulties. For the last during the last 30 years, obviously, we've had two different governments, and in the last 30 years, the three highest rates of house building have come in the last 5 years. So we have delivered between 230,000 and 240,000 homes during that period on an annual basis. Obviously, it's still away from our target. The target is a stretch target, but we need to find ways to accelerate that delivery. We're doing a lot of that through the long-term plan for housing that Michael Gove announced a couple of months ago in King's Cross. We're doing that by accelerating building in specifically London, Cambridge and Leeds, where we know that there's a huge demand for housing. We know that London specifically is absolutely not delivering what they need to deliver, and that the affordability pressures are acute. We're going to change that. And I think somebody said it earlier, I wonder, are we all young liberals now? We just need to build more bloody houses. And that's exactly what I'm going to do every single day while I'm in this job.
Wonderful, thank you very much. So we're going to quickly move on to the question and answer session. So I could just get a quick show of hands just from people, just so I can get a clip. There's lots of you. Okay, I'm not going to be hijacking as much of this as I might have hoped to. But I'm just going to get one in before we move on, which is, Rachel, given the slogan of this conference is making the difficult long-term decisions, does that mean that we really ought to be looking again at comprehensive planning reform? Because is that not the ultimate difficult long-term decision, given everything that this panel has said about housing supply?
Yes, it is, Henry, and we recognise everything that's been said by builders large and small. Since I've been in this job, I've heard time and time again how the planning system is labyrinthine, expensive, slow, full of delays. There's all sorts of things that have been added onto the planning system. Often it's an encroachment, bit by bit by bit. All of these things look good, they sound good, there's all good reasons for all of them, such as environmental assessments. We all care about that. But over a period of time, it's a bit like the boiling frog. What we've ended up with is a system that's really difficult to navigate, and that just adds cost and delay. We need to change that. We will change that. We're doing a lot of that in the Levelling Up Bill, but it's not going to happen overnight, because you're talking about a whole system across the whole country.
So you are going to take out the Lord's amendment to the Levelling Up Bill, which makes every single housing planning decision GRable, and the National Housing
Well,
Rules.
I definitely think I'll have a look at that.
Yeah,
yes.
that's it.
I think we voted that
Perfect.
down in the law.
Okay,
yes.
let's have the show of hands. Now, there should be some people with microphones somewhere. Right. We'll have the lady in the fourth row there, and we'll take two at a time, so the lady in the third row there. Just privileging the central corridor, but you will all get an opportunity. Please stand up and introduce yourself, and if your question's addressed to a particular panellist, please say so.
Well, I think it's to the Minister, because, first of all, I'm from the Richmond Conservatives. I'm also a councillor, and I have been on the Yorkshire Dales National Park for many years, and I'm afraid what I'm going to go straight to is the National Park, because you bring a lot of these planning reforms in, and but not in the national parks. Or the national parks can ignore them. And we have the list like that. We can't build. We won't have wide boundaries. We won't put a few trees up to screen them. No, the boundary is so tight. When we come to it, we can't build. Let's have 5. Now, I'm sorry, I shouldn't really make this a bit of a like this, but we had the Dean of Ripon. We put together 5 houses in every small village. Wouldn't spoil it. You try getting that through the planning and the local plan. And just one more thing, people who are working and living in the Dales and in this country haven't time to lobby government, so they never get anything put in, but all these with Friends of the Earth, etc., and the list goes up like that.
Thank you very much, and yeah, absolutely, build on the national parks, absolutely. Yes, no, entirely, I'm with you. Yes, you should have a microphone. Sorry, could we? Yeah, there we go. We do have 2.
Hello, my name is Shasha Adi and I'm from the ENDS report. I just wanted to ask, you said that there are plans to fix the nutrient neutrality problem, and the Housing Secretary Michael Gove just mentioned this in the last talk a couple of minutes ago. But I just wondered if you could clarify a bit more what the government's plans are on this, and how you're going to sort of ensure that no environmental degradation ensues.
Shall I do them both together?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm glad that me and my Secretary of State are singing from the same hymn sheet. That's always a great relief. We absolutely do plan to do it. We have already that legal framework already prepared. There is no degradation to environmental outcomes, let me be clear. Pollution does not come from new houses. New houses are built to very high standards. We have now left the EU. We voted to leave the EU. That means that we do not need to follow defective EU laws. And by the way, the EU laws that are the things that are sort of holding us up are not doing anything to improve those protected sites that they purport to protect. Now, we all care about the waterways, of course we do, and about the environment. We absolutely put that at the heart of our government programme. But these rules are something that is completely disproportionate to the actual impact. And when we brought forward that legislation in the House of Lords, we also brought forward a very extensive programme of environmental support from farmers to support building of wetlands, so that we would, across the board, actually protect the environment and start to remediate those sites as well. And don't forget, we have already passed legislation to make sure that the water companies are much better at upgrading their infrastructure, so that we can get that certainty for planning permission. So I do feel very strongly about this, and I'm afraid that we do need to fight that battle with people who are trying to make out that this is some kind of attack on nature. It is not. And as the lady there said very passionately, those people are able to lobby, they've got friends in the House of Lords, and actually what they're forgetting is those small builders. They're forgetting people who are trying to build affordable housing, homes in the countryside like you need. It is often those small rural sites, and those are the ones that are being held up. Not only that, but town centres, small brownfield sites in towns. We've just seen a big announcement from Michael Gove about the Towns Fund. But some of those building plots where we desperately need to regenerate high streets, they're held up with nutrient neutrality laws. It is absolutely insane. So I'm not going to apologise for bringing that forward and advocating for it at every opportunity. And the lady from the National Park, I wasn't sure whether you were in Richmond or the other one, but the one in the north. And I think that you're sort of right to highlight some of the problems there. And I think we have to obviously get that balance right with those landscapes that everybody feels passionately about. But it's got to be a working area. People live and work. It's just going to die if we can't have homes for people who run the farms, run the businesses, and you know, make it the place that we all love to see. We're looking at some of these things around rural exception sites, and I'm very keen on doing that because I think we've been a bit too cautious. I want to go a bit further, so we're having those discussions in the department now.
Brian, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, absolutely. The lady talking about the national park. We should be building homes in every village, in every town, in every city. That's how our country grew up until the 19th century. And that we've got a rich diversity of architectural styles, which is the envy of the world, because that's something we need to recapture. And as you were saying, in the national parks, well, not just in national parks, in the countryside, what happens is if people can't afford to live locally, they're having to leave their communities and work and live elsewhere. And that is not good for the fabric of our country. We do need development, sensitive development, built to a high standard, with communities focusing on the design of those buildings. So it's not an either or. I think most communities are very aware of the need for homes for their children and grandchildren, but the quality of design is very important. And what we have at the moment is a very polarised situation. So the point I was making earlier about the decline of local house builders, this would address your issue, because this would be a local house builder who has apprentices in the community, training those who can stay in the community. It becomes a vibrant community. And the government has put a lot of emphasis on urban areas, which I understand, but I would like to see an emphasis on every village, every town, to actually revitalise economic growth and give communities, ordinary people, what they want, a decent home at a decent price in every place they live.
Thank you very much. Did you want to...
Yeah, actually, if I could add, and Brian obviously making a very good case for local builders. The one thing that I would say is, although a national builder, I am a local builder. I've got 22 businesses right across the UK. We employ locally, we train locally. We can't move land, therefore we buy, we build and we sell locally. It's also a really virtuous ecosystem, isn't it, Brian? You know, that small house builders, large house builders, we train together, and you know, apprentices move through and back and forward between small and large house builders. I did just want to put some numbers around it, though, just so you can understand the extent of the nutrient neutrality issue from the wider home building issue. And when Rachel mentioned 300,000, I was almost ready to say 300,000 jobs per 100,000 homes, which is just under the number of homes that are currently stalled in the UK at the moment because of nutrient neutrality. That's £17 billion worth of economic activity. That's £2.7 billion worth of affordable housing investment. It's about £2.6 billion of local shopping, local business investment. It's about £1.2 billion in tax to the Exchequer. These are huge numbers. You know, for every 100,000 homes we build in the UK, that's at least 1% of our GDP. So these are significant, significant issues.
Thank you. No, it's just...
I was just going to make the point that Jenny just made, which was, yeah, that it's good that there's been two questions from the audience, and both positive pro-house building questions, which is a little bit unusual for in our experience of doing these. But yeah, the housing and housing output makes a massive contribution, as Jenny said, to the broader economy, and particularly to young people. I talked about skills, and it makes a huge difference to young people and the growth of the economy beyond the actual house, to the broader economy. So it's good.
Lovely. Okay, we'll have the gentleman in the fourth row on the outside there, and the lady in the fifth row there. If you could just keep your hand up so the microphone can find you. Again, we'll take the questions two at a time. So, sir, if you could stand up and introduce yourself.
Yeah, Mike Leonard from the Building Alliance, and my questions are aimed at the Minister as well. So, things have consequences. So, we're suffering a big decline in the delivery of housing, so people aren't getting the new homes that they deserve. We're seeing manufacturers having to close down production. We're seeing skilled bricklayers and other workers out of work and not being able to get the work that they need, and they'll leave the industry for a long time. So there's not a coincidence that our economy is where it is at the moment, because whenever housing is down and the building industry is down, the economy is down too. So my question to the Minister is, I appreciate you can't set the autumn statement and the King's speech, but please will you lobby on our behalf to get Britain building again? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fitchett from National Energy Action. I'm just thinking about standards in the owner-occupier sector, and just wondering about your thoughts on how to balance the need for better standards in the owner-occupier sector against ensuring that fuel-poor and low-income households aren't unfairly burdened with financial penalties as a result of unfair regulation.
Okay, so I think, does anyone want to field these first? Otherwise, I think we'll just, I think the first question was directed to you, Rachel, so we'll start with you and work.
The short answer to the gentleman there from the Builders Alliance, Mike, I think, is yes, I will lobby the Chancellor and the Prime Minister. I have already been lobbying him because I recognise everything that you're saying. I mean, we face this extraordinary coincidence of not only the pandemic and all those supply chain issues, you know, the Ukraine war, the consequences of, let's face it, the mini-budget, interest rates and inflation. All of these things have been toxic for the house building industry in particular. We are seeing some sort of slightly more positive news from the economy as a whole, but we do need now to take some very serious action, I think, as well as all the things the Prime Ministers do to tackle inflation, which of course will help. But we need this whole holistic supply and demand intervention. That's why when I talk about the long-term housing plan, it's not just one thing, because you can't pump money into a demand-side intervention unless you're also boosting supply, because we know and we understand that's just going to cause inflation. So, yeah, 100%. The lady there asked me about the owner-occupied sector, and I think that this is I'm not sure sort of exactly what you're referring to. Are you talking specifically about EPC rating? Yeah, exactly. It's a bit of a live debate at the moment because, of course, we have really invested and worked with the social housing sector and given them access to quite a lot of funding to upgrade their own stock. But then we also have the private rented sector, which is very significant for a lot of people. And you might be referring to the Renters Reform Bill, are you, possibly? Yes. So what we've said, and you'll have heard the Prime Minister talk about that, we don't want a situation where private landlords have got excessive costs to put upgrades into their houses where people are living on low incomes. Of course, you know, we absolutely do want them to make those homes warm and free of drafts and insulate them and enable the fuel bills to come down. But it's counterproductive if we put too much cost on those landlords too quickly. So we are going to be bringing those measures in, but in a more proportionate way. And we hope that will be welcomed by landlords, certainly the ones that I've spoken to so far. I think that's a much more sensible way of doing it.
Annie.
Yeah, actually a few things to pick up there. I mean, again, Rachel mentioned that government will reach their 1 million homes target. But if you would recall, please, the words that I said, which is that we plan years ahead. And what we're seeing is a very substantial and steep decline in the number of local plans being adopted. Only 40% of local plans in the country are up to date at present. And that is because of this policy vacuum that reform after reform after reform that has failed to progress has created this vacuum through which scarce resource within local authorities is unwilling to progress plans when they're not sure which plan style they're to be progressed. So although we are reducing volumes because of the market currently, actually the medium term looks really stark. Because the planning consents are falling. And they're not falling because we are not submitting them. They're falling because they're not being processed and because of this policy vacuum and local plan delays that are being created. We do see that our supply chain and manufacturers are worried about that sort of structural drop in housing numbers, and they will be making decisions now that will affect our ability to build back better. So, it is a call to action now. We really do need to address the deficit. And although, I wouldn't address the comment on government policy on existing home occupiers, what I would say is, as an industry, we are now delivering the best quality homes with the best energy efficiencies that we have ever delivered. The recently introduced Part L and F, which is energy efficiency and ventilation standards that we are now all building to, deliver some of the most cost-effective homes for the country. And although Minister has indicated that there will be some slowing down for existing stock, which I understand, as energy costs increase, it is important that we look to the refurbishment and the rebuilding of our housing stock. We have the oldest housing stock in Europe, the vast majority of which is below existing acceptable energy standards. I think it's about 38% of our housing stock in the UK was built pre-1946. That's more than any other European country. The oldest housing stock in Europe means probably the world. And that is going to cause some economic challenges to bring it up to modern, acceptable and efficient energy standards and costs.
Ryan.
Thanks very much. So taking 2 points. First, Mike, well done on raising your point about the Get Britain building. I think it's a reminder to everyone that the contribution that construction makes to the economy, 9% of GDP, and the fact that 3 million people work in our sector, is actually a key part of the economy. And we saw that during the pandemic when the industry kept going, and it's really important, I think, in terms of economic growth, that emphasis is put on the building industry. The second question about energy efficiency, well, I think this is where I think we really need to think about a longer-term view about transforming our existing homes. So, as I said earlier, I'm really proud of the housing stock that we have in this country. 85% of our homes will still be with us in 2050. So it's vitally important, actually, those homes are made fit for purpose in terms of energy efficiency. Partly to tackle fuel poverty, but also in terms of reducing carbon emissions, and also making sure that these homes last for hundreds of years more. The problem we think we've faced is actually we've had short-term policies. We had the Green Deal under the coalition government. We've had the Green Homes Grant Scheme, which came and was taken away. And there are very few incentives for owner-occupiers to upgrade. These things take a long time, and I think actually to retrofit 29 million homes requires that mission to be an infrastructure project all of its own, really, because you need to get the supply chain geared up. You won't get the installers ready and trained unless actually there's a clear political commitment to transform our existing housing stock. And that means consumers having more information about the homes, what they can do, because they won't be able to do it overnight. So there needs to be a consumer information campaign. There does need to be a range of incentives to help kickstart that market, just to get things moving. Then there needs to be regulation to make sure actually at some point when you buy a house or if you're having major work done, that should be the requirement to bring it up to a higher level. And then, of course, we need to train the builders and installers to get them up to the right level. I think it's a very exciting, ambitious programme. We're seeing some work on the social housing side, but we need to replicate that in the owner-occupied sector as well. And I think it's sometimes, Minister, it is about the mixed messages from government. Seize it as an opportunity. It will create jobs, and it will tackle the climate change, and it will actually provide economic growth right across the country.
Thank you. Now, Jenny and Brian have unfortunately broken the seal on one of my personal favourite issues, so I'm elbowing my way back in because they have mentioned the oldest housing stock in Europe and lettered documents, which means that I get to ask a question about the building regulations. So isn't that great? I think I'm going to direct this to the industry representatives first, actually, because this is one of the things that I found when looking at people debating about buying new builds. We were talking earlier about the challenges for new builds, is that actually an awful lot of the features, historic features, which sometimes make period homes so attractive, are just straightforwardly illegal to build now. You can't have stoops that steps up to your front door. Sash windows are in the process of being ruled out, I think. There's maximum window sizes. And there's all of these other things which mean that despite the often substantial financial penalties of having a badly insulated older home that needs maintenance, people are still prepared to insist on having a period property. So I guess I'll start with you, Lewis. How much of a barrier to a challenge for new builds is this regulatory problem, and is this something that the Minister and the government could take away and fix?
I think I recognise what you're saying, but I think it's an exaggeration, because if you look at homes that the new homes that are built across the country, I think they're fantastic. I think if you look at them, there's variety, there's the difference. I think they look great. And if you look at the aesthetic side, I think that often gets overplayed. And I think also what gets overlooked is the advantages of new build home, like the energy efficiency. So, it's the point that I was making at the end, that you can focus on the negative and forget the positive, and there's so many positive sides to new build homes, and I think we should collectively get behind them more.
Oh, no, absolutely. I was just saying there might be ways that we could do even more to...
I agree. Yeah.
Any other on building regulations?
Yeah, I think just, I would echo, of course, what Lewis has said in terms of, aesthetic. We do operate locally. We do take regard to vernacular, sort of local design issues. The Minister, will speak about design codes and, and how we are sort of building, to reflect local areas, and those can be controlled through design codes. But on building regulations, the building regulations are delivering now the highest quality homes that we have ever built. We talked about energy efficiency. What I would say, though, is it is one of those examples of when one part of government doesn't always know what another part of government is doing. And so we've had a series of building regulation changes, welcome though they are and progressive, which actually probably from a home builder, from a training point of view, particularly for the small house builders, would be so much more welcome if they came as packages. So the point that you were talking about windows is related to a potential overheating issue, but it was discovered or communicated extremely late, caused all sorts of near panic in the supply chain and in delivery, and really that's resource and function and adaptation that we really could and should try to deal with holistically. We have now, sponsored by government and the industry, a Future Homes Hub, which is also working with all of the large builders, our technical teams, working to support our small house builders all the way down through the supply chain, both from a skills and manufacturing point of view, to ensure that we are delivering a much more sort of virtuous approach to sort of future building regulation changes. But really, I just ask for a bit more joined-up thinking.
Yeah, I would echo that. Building regulations are there; they serve an important purpose. What my members complain about is actually changes that are poorly communicated and short timescales. And particularly if you're a small company, you don't have the backup or the resources to understand and to train your workforce within the time. So it's about giving people that time, but also better communication from government, within government and with the industry, to understand why those changes are needed, because we've got a constructive role to play in making sure those changes are truly effective.
Fair enough, Minister. The RICO goes reviewing the window size regulation. The sash window ban, could that be another thing?
I believe that there isn't a sash window ban. I think that's probably a little... No? I hope that sash windows have not been banned, put it that way. Not in terms, but in terms of I know that Michael's looking at it, and I think there was a little bit reporting on that, but I think, yes, we need to be sensible with these things.
Perfect. Right, show of hands again, please. We shall have the lady in the fourth row on the aisle again, and the gentleman in the fifth row with his hand raised in the green shirt. Thank you.
Hi, Isabel Balston. I'm a Reading Borough Councillor. I also work for Meeting Place, a communications company in the built environment. One issue that I come across in my day job is councillors don't understand planning, and more training needs to be given to councillors. One of the frustrations I've had is for example, a lead councillor has, for planning, has announced at committee proudly that he hasn't communicated with the objectors nor with the developer. What did he think he was doing? It's ridiculous. We need to have councillors talking constructively, having a planning officer in the room to negotiate on when with allocated sites in particular. You know, the local authority should be delivering homes on those allocated sites. It's just ridiculous for lead members not to engage, because once you get to committee, would you agree with me, Minister?
Thank you very much. Sorry, this is the first thing, so I've not done my normally quite sort of ferocious chairs thing. I'll have to bear in mind to do that in future, but just conscious of time. Thank you, sir.
Nick Connor, North West Wales Conservatives. Obviously, house building has devolved, so I will vent my frustration in the England forum and address this to the Minister. Minister, Margaret Thatcher said, socialism is two nations, the privileged rulers and everyone else. And it always gets to that. What I'm desperately trying to do is create one nation with everyone being a man of property or having the opportunity to be a man of property. Now, with the removal of mandatory housing targets, all-time demand in the housing sector, but all-time low in house building, and CCHQ putting out NIMBY leaflets across the country, is house building now for the privileged few?
Thank you very much. I suppose Rachel could start with you.
Yeah, so good questions, and thank you for your service as a councillor. It can't be easy, particularly when you are dealing with that sort of behaviour that you've just described. Now, obviously, in the sense of can the government do, we can't sit in every planning meeting, but we do have certain powers. Secretary of State has powers, I have powers. I've just literally seen a local government minister walking past, and he has powers as well. And we have used those powers, and it is right that we expect those local authorities to deliver on behalf of their residents, and that does mean creating a local plan. I don't want to disagree with Jenny, but it's not quite true that we've got this sort of very dire number of local plans. We have got quite a good record of local plans being produced. Some of them are going through different stages for all sorts of reasons, but obviously we want all local authorities to be producing those local plans, getting those sites there with the consent of local people. And we have taken a number of intervention actions over the last certainly since I've been in the role, where local councils have not been doing their duty and they've been failing residents. I think the thing here, this brings me on to the gentleman there from North West Wales. I mean, let's just face it, socialism in Wales has completely failed. They've got an absolutely shocking record of house building. I don't think they've even built any affordable housing. So, I mean, they keep lecturing us about the wonders of, Labour-run Wales and how it's a blueprint for everything. Well, good luck with that, because they're literally not building anything at all. So, I certainly don't want to have a look at Wales and see what they're doing there. But I think that your challenge about building houses, now I don't have time because I know Henry's going to cut me off, to talk about sort of how we have to think about NIMBYs. So if we sit here as a government and say NIMBYs are bad, obviously some people will applaud us and go great. On the other hand, we have got councillors here representing areas where they have faced speculative development over a period of years for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes, often, because they've just got very constrained problems in their area. Some places in the home counties, they really do have a lot of green belt, separate discussion. We have to be much smarter than that. We can't just go, you're a NIMBY, you're bad, you're a terrible person. Because actually, at the end of the day, those councillors are being voted in or out by local communities, and local democracy might be annoying, but consider the alternative. So that's why we have to stick to our targets. By the way, we have not dropped those targets. Can I say it again? We have targets. We are just going about doing them in a much smarter way that doesn't end up with all of our Conservative councillors getting voted out and being replaced by rainbow coalitions and the march of the frog spawn lovers and all the rest of it. So we have to be smart about this, my friends, if we want to get these houses built.
The alternative to local government would be development orders under the Town and Country Planning Act 1992, and it would be incredible. And
which
Michael
I think
Gove
we
should do
may
it tomorrow.
well be looking at some of that in the long-term plan for housing.
Excellent. Brian?
Yeah, so the right to a home is a basic human need, and we should actually be talking about housing. I mentioned at the beginning, I think housing should be one of the top 5 issues. You should be there, Rachel, with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister should be talking about the need to build more homes in this country. We have been building fewer and fewer homes for a long, long time. In the 1930s, we were building over 300,000 homes a year. I think it was 1934 when we were building that level. In the post-war period, we were building a lot more houses than we are at the moment. So we've actually got to change the narrative, and that comes from a political direction that actually the government is supporting house building. It should be cross-party, because housing is really affects all of us, and it should be a long-term commitment to providing the homes that this country desperately needs. As I mentioned about in terms of the economy, we need a supply of homes to enable labour mobility across the country. So yes, one nation, the best way to get a one nation approach is to give people a home to live in, and that can take a form of 10 years. Owner occupied is obviously the most attractive for most people, but we need social housing. I'm a director of an almshouse trust in Devon. Why don't we hear more about community housing as well? It worked for hundreds of years, and we should be thinking more in those terms, giving people more choice of the type of homes that they want. And with the comment about the planning system, yes, it's not working, the planning system. We need to actually make sure that there is a review, a comprehensive review, to make sure it delivers what people need in this country.
Yeah, I mean, very well said, Brian. You know, it's a fundamental right of everyone to have a home. And, you know, those elected leaders, whether it's local, national, you know, that is part of their responsibility. You know, I believe that the industry is willing and, you know, excited by the opportunity and indeed, you know, some of the challenge in delivering our new homes. I mean, I've set out some of the economic linkages as well. Not only is it part of our social, you know, values that we ensure that our population is housed, but there are economic consequences to the positive or negative if we fail to do so. The lack of economic mobility per health, per educational achievement, you know, the consequences are vast. But really just to reflect on Isabel's point, you know, I agree. We need more education into society generally around the housing argument and why it's important that sometimes we have to make hard choices, both locally, strategically and nationally. I do feel that some of those resource cuts that we've talked about over the last 15 years has hampered good education for our councillors. North West Wales. When I mentioned the oldest housing stock in the UK, I think you'll be aware that the oldest housing stock within the UK is actually in Wales. So its need is more fundamental. And the drop in housing delivery in Wales has also been one of the most sort of accelerated. So, you know, I think that there is very fundamental issues to be addressed in our Welsh housing stock. I think that my plea is, you know, there's really very little to be gained by continuing to polarise the discussion, but the voice in the debate over the last few years has been heavily weighted to the naysayers, to the no's, to the NIMBYs, and you know, and I understand sort of Rachel's point. We do need to be aware of the voiceless, the disenfranchised, those who are not part of a current community but can contribute positively to the life and health of a community. Because, you know, as with the national park, if we wrap it in aspic, it will eventually atrophy and die. And so the incomers are not necessarily a bad thing. They can reinvigorate and contribute to local life and to build communities. And that's something that I really do think we need to remember.
Thank you. And Lewis.
Yeah, just very brief. Is it Nick from Wales? You know, quoting Thatcher and the CC. I don't know the CCHQ NIMBY points that you're making, but I think it's reassuring to hear the Minister. You can see that the Conservative Party is very pro-housing supply, and I'm sure they're going to go into the next election, with a positive housing message. So there is local politics and NIMBY stuff that goes on. I can understand that, but it's really good to see the passion from the Minister about getting more homes built, and I think that's the position of the Conservative Party, which is really clear. So thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, there's 1 minute left on the clock, and I think with the best will in the world, we couldn't get a round of questions in there, even if I was at my most ferocious. So I am instead going to bring this proceedings to a close. I'd like you, first of all, to join me in a round of applause for our panel. Thank you very much. Thank you to the NHBC for supporting this event. And I have to say thank you so much for being such an enthusiastic audience. I was mentally prepared a little bit for this to be kind of like a Rorke's Drift situation. But actually, it was really fantastic to hear so many informed perspectives on how we can get more people building. So please, there's 39 more Conservative events, Conservative home events.
And I think I'm speaking at all of them.
Try and collect them all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've got...